All right, thank you again, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. We are happy to be presenting on what you need to know when your child turns 18. My name is Karen Nadoff.
And I'm Alan Press, and we're both partners at Shire Law Group in Lincolnshire, Illinois. And we've done this presentation quite a number of times, and it's always seems to be well received. We do invite questions during the presentation. So if you have something you'd like to ask, maybe put it into the chat feature, and then we'll go ahead and repeat the question, and we will then attempt to answer it for you. If you have something specific, or something for your own particular situation, we may defer the question or ask you to contact us after the presentation. Our emails are listed here on the screen, as well as our phone number. So you could always either call or send us an email at any time. Just reference the fact that you saw the presentation for Oak Park, River Forest, and then we would be happy to reach out to you and see if we can help you out.
So many of you joining us this afternoon have juniors in high school. Many of you have seniors in high school. Some of your children are about to turn 18, and some are already 18 years old. So to those who have seniors, congratulations to you and your family. Some of your children are graduating, and some of them are heading to college. Some of them are about to do some traveling, near or far. Some are going to start a new job, and some are moving to an apartment or to a dorm. And most likely it's a combination of a few of these things. But no matter what direction our children are headed in, there is one thing that we all have in common. And that is that once our children turn 18, they are now considered legal adults. And with that designation comes some important changes for you, for them, and for your family as a whole. So we're going to discuss some of those changes through this chart. So before 18, you could access your child's medical records. So if you had a question about your child's vaccinations, you could call up the doctor, the nurse, the doctor's office, and ask for the vaccination history to see if your child was up to date with all their vaccines. After 18, that right becomes limited. Before 18, you could make decisions about the course of your child's medical treatment. So if your child was playing a sport and got injured, or they tripped or they fell, you could go with your child to the doctor's office, and you could decide for your child about what kind of medical treatment was going to ensue. And after 18, that's no longer the case. Before 18, you could speak to your child's doctor. So if your child was ill, you could call up the doctor's office, you could speak with the nurse, you could relay the symptoms that your child was having, and you could decide on a treatment for your child with the doctor. And after 18, that changes as well. Before 18, you could help your child with finances. So if your child had a bank account and they weren't sure about one of their statements and they were confused, you could go ahead and call the bank on their behalf and figure out what was going on, help them out with that. And after 18, that changes as well. Before 18, you could access your children's educational records. And after 18, that right becomes limited. So what is a parent to do? Well, we're going to talk about that this afternoon. That's the focus of this presentation. We're going to talk about 3 essential documents that should be put into place. Those are healthcare and financial powers. We're also going to talk about FERPA. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and that addresses access to educational records. When we have brought this presentation to the community, often there's some additional common concerns which has surfaced, and we wanted to be proactive and bring those to all of you this afternoon. So Alan's going to talk a bit about wills and trusts, talk about access to digital assets. I'm going to talk a little bit about dorm, apartment, and global insurance, and also about health and safety apps. But first, we're going to get started with those 3 essential documents regarding healthcare and financial access. And those 3 essential documents are a healthcare power of attorney, a HIPAA authorization, and a power of attorney for property. And we're going to take each of these documents one at a time and discuss them. So the first document we're going to talk about is the healthcare power of attorney. A parent cannot make medical decisions on behalf of their adult child, even if it's an emergency, unless proper authorization has been put in place. And that proper authorization is this healthcare power of attorney. The healthcare power of attorney gives parents or a designated individual authority to make medical decisions on an adult child's behalf. Now, importantly, and we get this question all the time from our adult children who are our clients, am I giving up any of my rights? And the answer is no. None of these documents supersede their ability to make their own decisions. But authorization becomes especially important in the event that an adult child is unable to make his or her own medical decisions for one reason or another. Then this becomes essential. Having a healthcare power of attorney in place avoids the expense and aggravation of potentially having to go to court to get a guardianship. So you have the ability to make medical decisions on your adult child's behalf. So in the midst of an emergency, you don't want to have to worry about that. Having this healthcare power of attorney in place will allow you to step in when your children can't make their own medical decisions and act in and on their behalf. So one of my friends had a child who was a freshman and she was going to a large university. It was the first time that she was away from home. And my friend was concerned. She wanted her to get acclimated to the university. So she suggested that she join an intramural team, and she loved to play soccer. So it was a great suggestion. So she decided to go ahead and do that. So she joins the team and she's having a fabulous week. She's meeting people. She's getting acclimated. Things are going really well until the end of that week when on the field they collide with each other and she gets injured very badly. So she finds herself in University Health Services, first time away from home. She is in a doctor's office she's never been in before. She's in a lot of pain. She doesn't really understand what's happening, what's going on. And her mom needed to step in on her behalf and make some medical decisions. Fortunately, my friend had the healthcare power of attorney in place for her daughter, and she was able to send the healthcare power of attorney directly to the doctor and make decisions for her child because she could not make them on her own. So when we do these documents for our clients, we do originals, we do a copy, and we do electronic copies. Those electronic copies are just as good as an original or a copy of the original. So she was able to send that electronic copy immediately and make decisions immediately on their behalf. So we highly recommend that you have these documents somewhere electronically on your desktop or wherever you know they are. So if you need them, you can send them right away. Again, in the midst of an emergency, all you want to be doing is thinking about how you can help out that situation and have those documents in place. The next document we're going to be talking about is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. This is known as HIPAA. And I'm sure many of you have heard of HIPAA before. It allows healthcare providers to release and share medical information with whoever is designated on your HIPAA authorization. This allows doctors to speak about a student or an adult child's medical condition with whomever that adult child designates on their HIPAA authorization. So this becomes crucial if your adult child is admitted to a medical facility and you need to get information about what's going on. What is their condition? They might not be able to speak with you directly about their condition. They might not be able to fully relay medical information to you. Again, you'll have this HIPAA authorization and you'll be able to send it electronically and get that information that you need. At a time of crisis, your primary concern is always going to be to ensure your child is taken care of. So you do not want the potential additional burden of court proceedings and the associated legal costs, time-consuming and expensive. And to get information quickly is going to be key for you when a crisis occurs. So I, of course, have many examples to share with you this afternoon for my own children.
My children are perfect. All the examples come from Karen's kids.
It's true. So my son was going to a large university, And he had gotten sick. He wasn't feeling well. And like many of your children, you might experience this too. They start not to feel well, and you say to them, go to University Health Services, get checked out. And they'll say, no, I can't find the slot to go. I have a class, I have this event, that event, I have to study. And as the week goes on, they get sicker. This is what happened to my son. So by Saturday, he was really ill. And I get a phone call in the middle of the night, which you never want to get that phone call. And he said, Mom, I'm really sick. I'm going to the emergency room. Don't worry. My friend is driving me. I have my cell phone, but I'm like almost out of battery. I'm almost out of power. I'm on one bar. He said, but don't worry, my friend will text you and keep you updated. And I forgot to bring my charger. So my heart is racing. And next thing I know, I'm not hearing anything. So his friend texts me and says, we're at that emergency room. They won't tell me anything that's going on because I'm not authorized to get any information. And I just don't know what's happening. So my son doesn't have a cell phone. I don't know what's going on. I call the nurse's station. I say to the nurse, can you please tell me what's going on? This is my son. They said, we can't even tell you whether he is admitted unless we have the proper documentation. Again, I had it electronically on my desktop. I sent it right away, called back the nurse's station, and they said, okay, now we can give you information. Now that we have the documents, we're sorry, but we couldn't give it to you before. And at that point, I was able to get the information I needed. And I had the power of attorney for healthcare in case I had to make a decision on his behalf. I didn't need to use it in that case, but I needed my HIPAA authorization to find out what was going on. So these documents are extremely important to have in place should you need them.
So the next document we're going to talk about is the power of attorney for property. And in this document, think of property in the broadest sense. So anything financial related. Karen already walked you through the power of attorney for healthcare and the HIPAA authorization form. Of course, they're medical related. This form is financial related. So, and I'll also reiterate what Karen said earlier. You know, we sometimes will get our adult children come into the office and they ask, you know, why am I being asked to sign these forms? What are they for? And really the main reason is to avoid the need for a guardianship if there's a situation where they can't make their own financial decisions or their own medical decisions. So by having these documents in place, you hopefully will avoid the necessity to have to go to court and open up a guardianship estate in order to make these decisions. Because when the child turns 18, they're a legal adult. And as a parent, you don't necessarily have the rights anymore to make those decisions. So what does this power of attorney for property do? It allows parents to manage their adult child's finances. It becomes critical if a child cannot make their own decisions for some reason. So, of course, if there's an accident or an illness and a child is unable to make financial decisions, having this power of attorney for property in place is going to be very useful. The form can also be set up to be utilized out of convenience as opposed to only being used if a child is incapacitated. Let's say they love college, but junior year, they want to travel abroad and study in Europe or whatever they're going to do. So they're not incapacitated, they just might be unavailable to do certain financial things. This power of attorney would also be handy in that situation as well to enable you or whomever they designate in the form as their agent to make financial decisions for them, either if they can't do it themselves or they're just unavailable to do it for themselves. So that's kind of a nice feature about this document as well. It doesn't really apply to the medical documents because, of course, if a child can make their own medical decisions, they're going to do that anyway. But with the power of attorney for property, it can also be used for convenience in addition to be used if your child is incapacitated. You use this form for anything relating from bank accounts, car or auto titles, anything financial related. And by having this in place, again, you're going to avoid the necessity of having to go to court and open up a guardianship probate estate, which of course is going to be time consuming, expensive because you have to hire a lawyer to go to court to do it. So this kind of avoids all of those necessities. And if adult child is not readily able to access their bank account and there's an issue, a parent can then assist when they have the authorized power of attorney. So there's a question, it's a great question. Does this, do any of these forms, or particularly this power of attorney for property, make somebody responsible for the debts of a child? And the answer is no. So for any power of attorney situation where you have somebody designating an agent to act on their behalf, that agent doesn't take on any personal responsibility by virtue of being an agent under the power of attorney for property. That would apply to any type of debt, including credit card debt. In other words, a specific question there. So this power of attorney for property, we draft them to be very broad. And by the way, we do utilize the state statutory forms. We're going to talk about kids that go to school out of state and all of that in a few moments. So we'll get there. But the form is, we try to make them as broad as possible because you don't know what happens in life or what situation you may need the power of attorney for. So we use the statutory form, but we do add additional powers that are related to what a young adult might need when they're starting off in college and perhaps in their first job. So we do add things. So you can see that you can handle tax matters, anything relating to banking or financial, motor vehicles, the ability to do additional estate planning. And we're also going to talk about digital assets in a moment. There are a couple questions. Let's take a quick look. Do most college health clinics have the HIPAA form available? And the answer is yes. So what we're suggesting that you prepare in advance is a generic HIPAA that could be utilized anywhere, because you don't always know where you're going to wind up, right? So you could be traveling and you wind up in a medical facility you never expected to be in. You wouldn't have a HIPAA pre-filled out for that, right? Especially, and if you were unable to fill one out when you entered the facility, you're going to be in trouble. So having a generic HIPAA available is always good. But yes, some of the university healthcare systems probably have their own HIPAA form, just as all medical providers do. So we're not suggesting that you refuse to sign those. We just like to have this generic HIPAA in your pocket, so to speak, or in your arsenal of things that are available to you if it becomes necessary to use one. The other thing that we add to the power of attorney is, because it's not in the statutory form, is the ability to access digital assets. And of course, this is becoming so much more important these days as we do everything online. I was just commenting, my daughter just asked me that she had to order a checkbook because she's never written a check in her life. And I thought about it for myself, and I think I only write a couple of checks a year now. So everything gets paid online, everything is happening online. So it's great to have specific authority to access things online when you can. Now, we also always recommend that as a family, you may want to consider having a password emergency system or management system, because is it going to be easier for you as a parent to access your child's online bank account if you know the password, as opposed to relying on the power of attorney to try to get it? And of course, the answer is going to be yes to that. So you may want to consider, covering yourself from both angles there. So that is as easy as possible. Now, we do get a lot of questions. Hey, my student is going, my young adult is going to be going to college at Penn State. So that's not in Illinois, or they're going to USC in California, or they're going anywhere across the country. Does it make sense to do these documents here in Illinois if they're going to be going to school in a different state? And the answer is, we believe yes, because for a couple of reasons. One is the documents, as long as they're validly executed here in Illinois, are going to be valid in all 50 states. And we feel it's a benefit to get this taken care of, especially during the summer, before the adult child starts college or goes back to school. It's nice to kind of have them in place. Now, does that mean that if they go to Penn State, that they couldn't just get the forms done in Pennsylvania from a local attorney there? And of course, they could do that. But most of our clients are going to schools out of state, and they all have the Illinois forms. Also, their residency is not really changing. But even if it did, like let's say it's a student that goes to Missouri or something like that, and I know it's very popular to change your residency from Illinois to Missouri because then you could get in-state tuition at that school. There, it just depends on, the Illinois forms are going to be valid there as well. Once in a while, we do have clients that will switch to Missouri forms so they can show the school that they're actually residents of Missouri. What about overseas? Or is that a whole different thing? And the answer, it's a great question. And the answer is that we cannot make any guarantees about how the forms will operate overseas. There's just too many variables. We would think that if you're in a English or a country that can decipher the forms and that there's no reason that they wouldn't honor them, but that's not a guarantee that we can make. And Karen.
And also, if you're studying abroad, there's usually somebody who's organizing that trip. So that would be a question for them. Are these forms going to be valid in the destinations that we're going to? And if not, then what do we need to do?
Okay, it says, do forms need to be updated annually? If I have a HIPAA and a medical power of attorney, does it ever expire? This is another great question. The forms do not expire. You have the ability to put an expiration date on the power of attorney forms, but there's really no reason to do that. What we tell our young adult clients is that, when they have a major life change in the future, they get married or they have a significant other and they want to take maybe mom and dad off the form and they want to add other people on, that might be a natural time to do a new one. But short of that, the forms do not expire and you do not need to update them on a periodic basis. Now, we do recommend to all of our clients that if they have powers of attorney that are like 20 years old, they do become stale. The forms do change over time, but that doesn't negate the validity of the older forms. They're still valid, but you might get some pushback, let's say from a financial institution that, geez, this power of attorney is 20 years old. How do we know it hasn't been revoked already or whatever? So you do run into that issue once in a while, but technically there's no expiration date and the bank is going to be obligated to accept that power of attorney under the Illinois statute. So there are protections in place for that. But the point being that, if a child is going to school out of state, you certainly can do the forms here. And if you prefer to do them in the state that they're going to, that's okay as well. So whatever you're comfortable with, but we do have most of our clients do opt to do them before they leave and they like to get them done here, knowing that those forms are going to be valid wherever they might go to school. Even if they land their first job, my daughter graduated this year. She's taking a job in Seattle. She has the Illinois forms that we prepared. We actually did hers for free. She's my daughter, but she's taking her first job in Seattle and we're not updating those to Washington state forms. Her forms are fine. They were just executed a couple of years ago and they're still good to go. So we're not going to be changing those.
Having these documents in place gives you peace of mind. That's what you want. There's a crisis, you want peace of mind. You have the documents at your fingertips. You have them electronically. You can send them off. They've been done correctly and they're going to be accepted. They allow you to make immediate decisions and give you access to critical information if a crisis occurs, like what I had with my son. Immediately, I could get information as to what was going on so I could focus on the situation. The documents are easy to put in place and they should be among the top of everybody's list once your child turns 18. Copies of the documents, again, should be kept in a safe and easily accessible place. We always, our young adults always say to us, do I take these with me to school? We're like, you don't need to take them to school. Keep them at home, keep them someplace safe. Those electronic copies, we give up the electronic copies not only to the adult children, but to the parents as well. And again, because those electronic copies are just as good as the originals or the copies, you're good to go with those.
We will point out that the adult child would be our client.
Yes.
You as parents get to pay for it, of course, but the adult child would be the client.
So we're going to also talk about FERPA. So in addition to limitations to accessing financial and medical affairs and information, FERPA speaks to the limitations that once your child turns 18, you have to accessing their educational records. So FERPA stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, known as FERPA for short. So this is a chart that demonstrates before your children become legal adults and after, and how that impacts with a FERPA authorization. So you could view your child's educational records before they turned 18. And after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. Before 18, you could request a correction to your child's educational records. And after 18, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. Before 18, you could decide who could see your child's educational records. And after 18, again, that right becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. Before 18, you could get photocopies of your child's educational records. And after 18, that right again becomes limited without the proper authorization in place. So you see a common theme here: proper authorization. And proper authorization is written consent. And that written consent is your FERPA authorization form. Now, these forms, they might be provided by the school that your child is going to. And often when your child's signing online to different things and checking off different boxes, they might even check a box where they're agreeing and authorizing your access to their educational records. These written consents go to the registrar's office. That is where they are housed. We always do a backup FERPA authorization for our adult clients. If you are not sure if your child has filled out a FERPA for the particular university they're going to, call the registrar's office and find out if there is one on file. If the school doesn't have their own FERPA authorization, then you need to put one in place. And there's a lot of misunderstanding around FERPA. A lot of times it's thought that FERPA is all about giving access to your grades, so your parents can see your grades. It's far more important than that. It's your educational records. So if your child is talking to an administrator, professor, and is having a particularly difficult time, and that administrator or professor is concerned, they would not be able to share their concerns with you unless there was a FERPA authorization in place. So these authorizations are very, very important, and very important to get them in place. For the schools, when they have their own FERPAs, sometimes they add things. They add things like you're consenting to your image being used for marketing, or for your address, your email to be listed in a directory. When our young adults say that they're not sure about a particular school form, we will look at those for them to make sure that they're okay. We don't want people signing things that they're not sure what they're signing.
There was a question before we get to the common concerns, or a comment regarding the fact that some hospitals may limit sensitive medical information even with a signed form. Yes, it kind of depends a little bit on the provider. However, and when we prepare our generic HIPAA authorization form, it's very expansive. So we feel it kind of covers everything. So the authority to obtain even sensitive information is on there. Again, that's something that we go over with the adult child to make sure that they understand it before they sign it. But we do make a very expansive HIPAA authorization. I mean, it's not 50 pages, but it's like 3 pages. And it is pretty broad in its scope, I guess, for lack of a better term. So we do try to address that issue. And really, when the person signs the HIPAA authorization form, they're authorizing the release of any medical information to the people that they've designated.
So like we said, when we have brought this presentation out to the community, we've had a lot of common concerns that have surfaced. And we wanted to bring those to you this afternoon. So Alan's going to talk about wills and trusts and access to digital assets. And then I'll spend some time on dorm, apartment, and global insurance, and talk a little bit about health and safety apps.
So let's start off with wills and trusts. Now, this is going to be a very brief conversation, because why this comes up is that the healthcare and the financial powers of attorney are an essential element of estate planning. But of course, a will and or a trust is going to be another essential part of it. So we get the question a lot of times, well, we're preparing these powers of attorney for our adult child and healthcare directives and FERP reform. Do they need a will or do they need a trust? And of course, the answer is going to be it depends. I'd say that most young adults, when they're graduating from high school or their college years, probably don't need one. But let's take a little bit of a closer look so you can maybe answer that question for yourself. Briefly, just to start off with, what is a will? We've all seen on TV, we watch like Dynasty or something, somebody passes away and everybody sits in a conference room and the good for nothing son finds out that he's only getting $10. That's on TV. A will, though, is a document that states where you want your assets or how you want your assets to be distributed at the time of your death. So that's what a will is. Let's say I'm married and I have a spouse, so I have a will that maybe says, when I die, everything to my spouse, but if she's predeceased me, then, everything in equal shares to my kids. And then my spouse would have, a similar document, a reciprocal document. That's typically the way a will might look for a married couple. For a single individual, like a young adult that we're talking about, they might have a will that says if they pass away, they're leaving their assets to the following people. And that could be, parents, friends, siblings, whatever the situation would be. A will is only effective at death. So a will covers after death. Powers of attorney and these healthcare directives that we're talking about only are valid during lifetime. So you can see how they kind of complement each other. A trust, in comparison, is a document that's actually going to be effective immediately. So a trust is useful during lifetime, let's say to plan for potential incapacity or disability, and it's also valid after death. So it could also be used to do the same thing that a will might do, but maybe with a little bit more specificity. I said that, I can't say that word. With a little bit more specifically, let's just say it that way. I know it's wrong. But that it allows you to state where you want your assets to go when you pass away. So in that regard, it does work similar to a will after death. So again, the question becomes, does my adult child need either one of these documents at this point? And of course, the answer is going to be, it depends. These are some of the questions you may want to ask. Does your adult child have a significant amount of their own assets? Because if they do, then doing some estate planning, of course, is going to make sense. If they have their own money, maybe they've inherited money from a grandparent or other relative. If they do have their own wealth, then that's something that they may want to consider. Also, let's say they just have regular accounts. Do they have perhaps payable on death designation? Because if I have a bank account that's payable on death to my son, well, then when I die, my son automatically gets the ownership of that account without the need of a will or a trust. The same thing if the assets are held jointly. So you may have joint accounts with your adult child. You may have a bank account that has your name on it and their name. If they were to pass away, you would become the sole owner of that account and vice versa, right? Because by virtue of that joint ownership of the account, it's typically referred to as joint tenancy, maybe with the right of survivorship. You may have seen that term before. So joint accounts go to the joint owners when one of the surviving joint owners, when one joint owner passes away. The other thing that's going to avoid the need for a will or a trust is going to be beneficiary designation. So if your child has a life insurance policy, or perhaps they have a retirement plan like an IRA or a Roth IRA, these typically will have the ability to name a beneficiary. And that's an agreement that's made with the custodian of the IRA or the life insurance company that's holding the life insurance policy to pay a specific beneficiary or beneficiaries upon the death of somebody. So again, those will avoid the need for having a will or a trust. So if your child has modest assets of their own and they have beneficiary designations or they're jointly owned with you, well, that's something that may negate the need at this point in time anyway to do a will or a trust. Now, of course, Later on in life, they graduate from college, they start working, maybe they get married. Of course, when they start a family, those are all good times to consider putting together a will or a trust to supplement the powers of attorney and the healthcare directives that we're talking about today. And if you have a specific question about your child's situation and whether you're unsure as to whether or not they would need a will or a trust, please let us know. We're happy to help you answer that question. But we are saying today that everybody pretty much needs the powers of attorney and the healthcare directives, whether they have money or not. That's always a good thing to have in place. The other thing we're going to talk about is wills and trusts and digital assets. So we did mention digital assets prior in the power of attorney, but you may have picked up on the fact that I stated that the powers of attorney are only effective during lifetime. So you also want to address access to digital assets if you do a will or a trust as well. So that's something that you want to be on the radar as well.
So we're going to talk a little bit about insurance. So when you're putting together your list of to do, put this on your list as well. So things happen and you want to insure yourself with dorm, apartment rental, global insurance if you're traveling. So standalone policies for this renter's insurance are surprisingly inexpensive. Your homeowners might also cover this type of insurance for you, but the deductible might be so high that it's more economical to get a standalone policy. So we don't really endorse one policy over another, but look into it, see what's going to make sense for you. Certainly if your children are traveling, you look into that global travel insurance, and if they're moving, looking into that dorm, apartment, and rental insurance becomes something that could be very worthwhile. And I can give you a personal example of why it is. So my other child went to school in the middle of Pennsylvania, Penn State, right? And before both of my kids went to school, we said to them, look, whenever you leave a place that you're at and you're using your computer, take your computer with you, because things happen and you don't like to think about the fact that things might happen, but their whole world, as we all know, is on their computer. What they're doing in class is on their computer, their tests, there's exams, their whole social world, everything is on that computer. And they both knew that going off to college. So my daughter, on a very cold, wintry day, put her warm coat on and her backpack with her computer, and she went off to the library for her favorite place to study. And she found her spot and she got situated, she gets her computer out, her coat's away, and she gets hungry. And probably like all of you, I didn't have Grubhub when I went to Penn State. So I didn't have somebody who could deliver a meal to me, but they do. And she was hungry. So she called Grubhub and she had to go downstairs to pick up her lunch. So heeding the lesson, she took her computer with her and she went downstairs to get her lunch. When she got back to her spot, her coat had been stolen. So not only was she distraught over the fact that somebody would actually steal her coat at Penn State, which is shocking, I have to tell you, but also that it's the middle of winter and she's freezing cold. So fortunately, we had this insurance, and all she had to do was file a report with the police station. And within a week, she had a replacement with the exact same coat that we had gotten her. And it was that easy and that simple, and the insurance had paid for itself. Insurance also covers, depending on the policy, theft of that computer or possible damage if it was dropped. So you have to look into these different policies, see what they cover, and see if it's going to make sense for you and your family. But definitely something to look forward to researching, because personally, I can say that it was worthwhile for us, and the cost of it is relatively little. And if you need it, it's a good thing to have. And then the other thing we wanted to bring to your attention today is something that we always show to people when we do presentations, not only for your 18-year-olds, but for all of you. This is the Medical ID app. So if you have an iPhone, you will see this on your home screen. It's a white square with this little red symbol in front of it. And if you have a different kind of smartphone, you can actually download a similar health app onto your smartphone that does the same function. So the medical ID app is for primarily first responders. They know to look for this. They're able to bypass lock screen, whether it's facial recognition or it's a numerical code, and they can get right into whatever information is placed in that medical ID app. So it becomes extremely important if your child has a medical condition, or perhaps they have an allergy or a sensitivity to a particular food or a medication or to latex, whatever it might be. So it's an opportunity for you to put that information into this app, and a first responder upon a scene is trained to look for this and to access this and see if there's anything that they may need to know.
We got a couple of questions. One was going back to the insurance topic. What do you think about tuition insurance? It's also relatively inexpensive. I have to admit that I've never heard of that.
Neither have I.
So, but of course, if that's something that's available, maybe that's related to COVID and the cancellation of classes, I don't know. But that's a great thing to look into. I guess, if these insurances, I mean, you either are, it covers withdrawal from school for any reason. Okay,
Okay.
well, that sounds pretty good. So certainly something else to look at. We appreciate the suggestion. I just can't speak on it personally because
Yeah.
wasn't even aware that existed.
And maybe if you have a homeowner, something to ask, whether that's covered as well. We don't know the answer to that, but certainly something to look into.
And then the other question has to do with the fact that, okay, we have a child turning 18 in November when they're already going to be away at school. So what's the best way to take care of these documents when she won't be here? Well, that's a great point. You do have to be 18. So your adult child or your future adult child cannot sign these documents before they're 18. But we are going to speak in a few minutes about doing this remotely over Zoom and how that works. So that's going to be one option. Also, I have to say that during the Thanksgiving break, we're awfully busy here with a lot of these because kids are coming home and they want to get those documents done during the week that they're back at home or over the the Christmas holiday break at the end of the year as well. So, but yes, you have to be 18, but we do have some options for you. We're going to get to that in a few moments. Just to let you know how that works.
And we do have some young adults who spend part of their birthday with us because their parents want to make sure there's not a lapse. And we do make it as pleasant as possible for them since we know that they're spending part of their birthday with us.
Kind of a weird way to spend your birthday, but we do have like a little box of candy that we give to them.
Yeah.
So if your adult child comes on their birthday, they get a little bit of an extra treat to compensate them for having to sign legal documents on their birthday. So the recording is going to be available, by the way. So yes, we are going to, at the end, we're going to put up our emails again. If you'd like a copy of the recording, you could either request it from us. We're also going to send it to Jill. So if you know Jill, and you can reach out to her directly as well. We don't put anybody on a mailing list. We're not going to pester you with an email back saying, when are you going to sign up to do this? We'll leave that to you. If you're interested in working with us, that's great. If you're not, that's okay as well. So don't worry about that. We don't send you any marketing materials or anything like that. We got a couple more questions. What are the downsides to using the online free forms for HIPAA? So the only downside for us would be that we're going to talk about our program and how inexpensive it is. And I think the biggest problem for people is actually executing it properly because there's requirements for witnessing and also for notarizing the documents. So by having a professional do it, an attorney or a law firm, you're going to be able to make sure that it's executed properly and all of that's going to be taken care of correctly. The other thing is that, we have seen people get the forms online. Some of them are okay, some of them are not. So you just have to be careful. I mean, I don't know what to tell you with that. Again, we make this program very affordable because we know that they're young people, they're going to college, and we do this as kind of like a passion project for ourselves. So consider that before you make the decision to do it on your own. But these forms, at least the powers of attorney for healthcare and financial, are the Illinois statutory forms. So you can find them online and you can do it yourself. The HIPAA form is something that we craft ourselves under federal law. So that's a federal document. And the FERPA form, we also utilize the federal document, suggested document as well. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you certainly can do that, but we're going to talk about how we do it, and you may want to consider that as being a good option.
You know, like Alan mentioned, in Illinois, if you don't list specific powers in your powers of attorney, the people that are named to step in on the adult child's behalf might not be able to act on those powers. So we add additional powers like the digital assets and some other powers as well that you might not find in the statutory forms, but the statutory forms are there.
And then we also, a couple other quick, can the HIPAA authorization be conditional? Yes. So if there's any particular concerns on any of the documents, we can customize them. That's another benefit of having a lawyer do it, because we would know how to do that. Whereas if you're just using a form from the internet, that might be rather difficult. Other question is that, can you make the form effective only if a person is incapacitated and not a blanket authorization? Of course, we can do that as well. So we do tailor these to the way that the young adult wants the documents to be. And we're going to talk about our process in a few minutes when we get there. Okay. And yes, I mean, so again, some of these questions are geared towards, can the forms be limited? Yes. Now, we're not big proponents of limiting the forms too much, because you want them to be effective, right? You could limit them to death, and then when you're trying to use it, you're going to get somebody on the other side, the receiving end of it is going to be like, well, geez, I'm not really sure, this is going to be valid because the form is restricted this way, right? So we're not going to encourage you to restrict it too much, but yes, if restrictions need to be made, that's something that we could certainly do for you. We're going to move forward a little bit, and then we'll come back to the questions at the end.
We'll touch just very briefly on safety apps. And this is a question we get all the time. People ask us, what do you use? And we, again, don't endorse one app over another, but we will say, do not download an app without vetting them. There are literally dozens of options for safety apps on the internet. The best way we think is to ask your children, what apps do people that you trust use? And is that going to be good for us as a family? Ask your friends, other parents, what they use. I can tell you personally, when my daughter was at Penn State, I used Life 360, I used Find My Friends, I used Track My Uber ride, and I used Track My Walk. So those were what worked for our family. So again, see what's going to work for you, what's going to give you peace of mind, them peace of mind, and vet them before you download them.
Okay, so we're going to talk briefly about planning remote. We're almost at the end of the presentation, so I know there's some questions waiting, and we will get to them. Planning remotely. So this is an option. Of course, when COVID kind of came on, Governor Pritzker passed a law that allowed legal documents to be signed over Zoom. So we utilize that procedure. It's there's some requirements that need to be followed. We need to record the session and a whole bunch of other things that we need to do, but we've done a lot of these, so we're well versed in getting that done. So, and this is even handy if your adult child is also away at school, although we will point out that they're supposed to be in the state of Illinois when they're signing the document. So we'll work with you to make sure that that can get done properly in compliance with the law. So this is a great time to do this. Before they go to school in the fall is usually the best time to get it done if they're in fact 18 yet. We do have a program. We don't mean for this to be a commercial, but we briefly want to tell you about how we do it. So we have we've kind of automated the process in that we send out a questionnaire to your adult child. Once we have their information, of course, you can be copied on it as well, and they would fill out certain information. We then prepare the forms, and then we have the forms available, and then we set the meeting to review everything with them and to sign the documents. So, and changes, of course, could be made if something needs to be adjusted. But we explain everything to them so they're not just blindly signing documents and they don't know what they say or what they're doing. We go through all the different scenarios and discuss that with them. So our price for that is $300 per child. So it's pretty a reasonable fee. So we do this at a lower price to encourage people to do it. That only applies to the young adults, people that are heading off to school, or they just graduated from high school and are starting their first job. Anyone in that situation would qualify for that pricing. And if you have twins or triplets, it is $300 per person. There's no discounts for volume, I guess, what we say. But this is a great time. You want to ensure that your family, and particularly your adult child, are protected with the proper powers of attorney and healthcare directives that are going to give you the power to act on their behalf if that became necessary. And remember, once it's too late to do it, right? So God forbid if a child were to become incapacitated and they're unable to execute documents, you cannot create the power of attorney at that time because they don't have an ability to sign it. So then again, you're forced with the guardianship, having to go to court, time consuming, expensive. You draft these documents, you hope you don't need them for anything, you put them in a drawer, you have them on your desktop like Karen. If you need them, they're there and you have access to them. If you don't, then you don't have to worry about it.
So when your children turn 18, or if they're already 18, some of the most important gifts that you can do to protect them and your family is to get that power of attorney for healthcare in place. So if they cannot make their own medical decisions, there's people named to step in on their behalf. That HIPAA authorization, super important. If you need to get information about what's going on with your adult child, and like Alan said, what if they're in an emergency room they've never been in before? That emergency room has no information on who to contact. Those HIPAA authorizations will be at your fingertips, and you can send it to that emergency room and get that information. Power of attorney for property to help out with financial affairs. That FERPA form, so you can access educational records. Will or trust, if that's advisable. Check out that insurance, see if that's going to work for you. And check out that medical ID app as well and see if that's something that could be good for your family, as well as any kind of safety apps that might work well.
So here's our information. We do have a couple of questions. That's the end of the presentation, but let's see what we've got for questions. So please feel free to stay online and let's see what we have here. Just trying to pick up where we left off. Okay, here we go. Yes, so do these also account for post-mortem or after death? So remember, powers of attorney, healthcare directives are only effective during lifetime. Now, the Illinois statutory power of attorney for healthcare does have a section on there that authorizes the agent to carry out the person's wishes even after death in relation to burial or organ donation. So there's some of that in there, but the documents in essence become no longer valid after somebody passes away. You'd have to either rely on a will or a trust at that point. Do you offer well, this is a student discount, so that's a great question. And the $300 includes which documents? That's going to be the power of attorney for healthcare, the HIPAA authorization form, the power of attorney for property, and the FERPA authorization. So all four of those documents are included. In addition, if your child's school has their own HIPAA form, we'll also assist in getting that signed and notarized and reviewed for you as well. Some of the schools do have their own form. We recommend just doing both so you have it.
And this is for the whole process. So we don't charge extra. If you have questions or the adult child has questions, or there's a lot of additional things that we need to do in terms of making sure that we get the right timing for them to come in. This is something that we do because we're passionate about it, because we have kids, because we needed to use these documents, because we don't want people walking into our office and having to go to court to get a guardianship. We just don't want that happening. So it is $300 for everything, all inclusive. And like Alan said, we've tried to make it really user friendly. So everything is done online. So even that questionnaire that's filled in, it's all online. So the first time that we'll meet with that student is to review and sign the documents. We know that that adult child might be meeting an attorney for the first time, and we're super sensitive to that. We want to make sure it's a good experience for them, but we also want them to know that they should never sign anything with not understanding it or not reading it. So we spend a lot of time reviewing it. And the other thing that Alan mentioned is we have specifically stated on the documents that we draft that these are intended to be valid in all 50 states. Jill had mentioned that that was a common concern that people were having, so we wanted to make sure that you all knew that as well.
Yeah, and please feel free to reach out to us if you want a copy of the recording. We're going to send the copy to Jill as well. I'm sure she'd be happy to forward it
Is there
as
Q&A or is
well.
that different?
That's the same, that
Okay.
won't go away for some reason.
Okay.
I don't know. Oh, done. I have to hit
Oh,
the done button.
okay.
Okay, there we go. So thank you very much, everybody. We really, really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And again, if you have any questions, let us know. And congratulations to all of you for who have the graduating students, and good luck in their college career.
Yeah, we'll put the our emails in the chat. Again, a huge thank you, Jill. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you to all of you for spending a little part of your day with us.
Thank you for doing this. It's great.
Our pleasure. We know how important it is to get this information out, so it's our pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Stop the share.